A little thing is legal drinking age. I mean, we are deliberately and very clear that we are an adult non-alc brand, even though it's 0.5%. But I don't ever want to be in a situation, and I've seen it, where you end up in a gateway. So I have a 10-year-old son, and he said to me the other day with one of the zero beers, he said, "Dad, so is it all right for me to drink this? And then when I'm older, I can drink the real thing."
Before we get started, just a really quick question. Have you checked out the awesome free stuff available at lownodrinkermagazine.com/free gifts? Well, you should. Hi, Low No Nation, and welcome to this week's conversation on the Low No Drinker podcast, bringing you closer to the people, places, and brands leading the low, no, and light alcohol revolution. Today is a wonderful conversation. I'm chatting with a gentleman who has gone from Royal Marine Commando to financial services and pharmaceuticals to global CEO of a very well-known vodka brand, and is now embarking on his own new venture as the CEO of Dionilife. Not to mention being awarded an MBE by our late and great Queen. So it is an honour to have our guest here today. And he is a font of knowledge in the beverage space. And as I said to him before I press record, I want to squeeze as much of that knowledge out of him as I comfortably can. So thank you very much for joining me today, Damian McKinney. How are you?
Denise, I'm really well, and I feel humbled by the introduction. Thank you.
Oh, well, it's lovely to have you here. You've done some fantastic stuff in and around beverages for quite some time. And I'm really intrigued to get your perspective, obviously, on the low-no market, what's happening in it at the moment, where you see it going, and how Dionilife has come about to be, and what its impact is going to be in the space. But before we get into all that, I like to give listeners a little bit of a background on who they're spending time with today. So start where you want to start. What is it that's led you to now be in this low-no space with us?
So, thanks, Denise. I suppose the first headline is I'm a third-generation Kenyan, grew up in Kenya, had the most amazing childhood. And at the age of 13, at a Sunday lunch, my family introduced me to a bottle of Tusker beer. Many would say 13 years old, that sounds like abuse. No, it was essentially, here is a family occasion. It is a social occasion. Everybody's having a drink. We're going to teach you how to have a drink and enjoy it. And so every Sunday after that, I was allowed to have one bottle of Tusker beer and enjoyed it. No spirits were ever allowed. That was the rule, and no wine, but you could have a beer. And so I grew up understanding, I think, the sort of social benefit, in a sense, of having a drink and enjoying it and enjoying the taste of it. The sort of second headline is, as you rightly said, I was a Royal Marine Commander. I spent 18 years. I spent a lot of time, as our US colleagues would say, on active duty, on operations, as we would describe it in the UK. And one of the things we would do, and sometimes I was out for 3 weeks, 4 weeks on operation. So we would come back in. And one of the first things we would do is go down to the good old Naffy or the bar, and we would buy, I like whiskey. So I would buy some whiskey and some people buy beer, quite a bit of it at the time. And then we would sit there, we would clean our weapons, and we would do through a debrief. And part of that debrief, to be honest, was actually getting the experiences out of you. And you know that in the military, there's been a huge issue with PTSD, and people, certainly when I joined, it was still relatively new, this concept, and there was a lack of real understanding. But the advantage of having a drink at the end of the day is, and if I go back to the social occasion, it brings people together and allows them to share their experiences, good and bad. And I think, look, I've had my share of PTSD. I know a lot of colleagues who've had a lot worse. But in a way, what helped was actually this ability to, and indeed encouragement to, talk. And I think absolutely the drinking helped. Without obviously extreme. So that's the sort of two. And then my third headline is, in a sense, given all of that, I've seen the sort of positive benefits of it. But there is the other side of the coin. I've also seen the negativity associated with it. And one of those was, frankly, when I first came to the UK, I had never witnessed binge drinking. I'd never witnessed this desire to go out and get paralytically drunk, to get, inverted commas, rat-assed. I used to look at people and go, why? Why would you want to go through that experience? Frankly, I found it really odd. And then I think the extension of that was my son, when he was in California, he spent a couple of years over there. We were talking about this, and he said, Dad, and he was helping out with the Alcoholics and Drug Anonymous. And he said, have you ever been to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting? And this was at a time when I was doing a lot of work with Diageo and some of the brands. And of course, the great cry is drink responsibly. And I said, no, I haven't. I want to come along. And I sat in on that first meeting, and I've done a number since. And of course, you listen to the harrowing tale of the individual who'd gone through this alcoholism. And do you know what? The effect for me was not so much listening to their personal story, which in itself was tragic, but it was the effect on their partners, their family, the community, particularly the ones they loved the most, and the abuse that they were putting them through. And I remember thinking, this is hideous. And then, of course, then you go back, and then there's an aspect of, volume associated with alcohol, and therefore encouraging people to take shots. It's great fun, but again, it's good sales. And you just realize that this cannot be right. The idea of socializing and having a drink is a good thing, but encouraging that extremism cannot be good. And I know that addiction is one of those things that people may or may not have an association with, but we were encouraging it in a sense. And then I think the final piece is, at the end of the day, there is a wealth now of knowledge and encouragement from the World Health and others saying, be careful. Now, I know there's a lot of people saying, well, that's ridiculous, it's prohibitionist, jumping on the bandwagon. I wear a Fitbit. And I bought a Fitbit, I don't know, it must be six years ago. And I bought it because I'd been trained never to have more than 5 hours sleep a night. That's what you do. You don't need more than that. But wrong, you do need more than that. And so I bought it really so I could look at it and somehow rewire my system to start sleeping more. And what I discovered in the process, because of course you look at the dashboard, and I'm a very competitive individual, you look at the dashboard and you suddenly realize that, okay, my sleep is going up or down, but then you start to look at your beats per minute. And you realize that if you have more than a couple of drinks a night, then, typically my heart rate, I'm reasonably fit, was about 44 resting at night. It will go to 54. Okay. And you just look at that and you go, that's fact. That is an absolute fact. So if you take the binge and the Alcoholics Anonymous, and then you take the knowledge, and I'm seeing it like that, I went back to what I've always believed, that I'm not anti-alcohol. I'm a really big believer in inclusivity, but I'm a real believer in moderation. Okay. And therefore, that's what's taken me to, frankly, where I am now. I feel like I can go out and have a few non-alcoholic beers. I can have a drink, have a whiskey, but I can get in my car and drive home safely, and I can get up in the morning and feel great and enjoy the sunshine and go to the gym. That's my journey, and that's where I am. Love it.
And I love it too, Damian. I do. I'm very much a big proponent of the moderating lifestyle, however that looks for somebody. There's a lot of people that bite back at the term moderation, and they always assume that it means that, well, if you have to count your drinks, then you've got a problem, or if you're only allowed to have this, that, and the other. But moderation doesn't have to work like that. My own journey into this life was me passively moderating, because I just realized, like you, that the alcohol was having a deeper impact on parts of my life than I had recognized before. And therefore, I just didn't want to drink as much. So I moderated my drinking to only having something when there was a glass of wine I really, really liked. Or, I really felt like, yeah, this is a good time for me to have a drink. The rest of the time, I felt empowered to actually go, do you know what? I don't fancy it today, so I'm not going to. And
I like that a lot, and I think, but I had a conversation this morning. I love you get in a taxi, and you always end up having a great conversation with the taxi driver, and they're the font of all knowledge. But funny enough, we were talking about extremism, and I've always been concerned about people who say, so alcohol is, there's a whole negativity. So if you drink alcohol, you're the scourge, you're evil. But there's a flip side, which is, and if you stand there and say it's all about being non-alcohol, then equally you're an extremist. I don't know. Look, I mean, there's a risk getting in my car, but I get in my car because it's somebody once said to me, if you could take all the negativity, if you could keep the alcohol, but take the ethanol out, then in a way that's a big part of it. And so my view at the end of the day is I really believe in inclusivity. I really believe we have a lot of mental health issues out there. And part of the pandemic, you stick somebody in a room on their own and force them to go through isolation. It's not fair. It cannot be good. And I think that we live in a world today where we just actually want to increase people's opportunity to socialize and be inclusive and so forth. And therefore, why wouldn't we provide safe alternatives? And by the way, I also believe in maturity of people. Just educate them and just allow them to make their own choices around what the risk is. But importantly, I think moderation is a safe way of drinking, but at the same time, enjoying yourself. So I'd hate to be the extremes.
I think we're singing from the same hymn sheet as they say on that one.
Good.
There's something you mentioned a phrase there. I wasn't planning on asking this, but it's actually something that I found quite interesting because it's a phrase that gets a lot of people's backs up. You were saying in your past working for big alcohol, I'm using inverted air quotes there, the phrase was drink responsibly. Now, a lot of people in this space find that term, should we just say ineffective? Their reasoning being that, if you're encouraging somebody to drink, is it responsible? Is it fair to ask them to do so responsibly? What are your thoughts on that phrase? Do you think the term drink responsibly actually has any power? Does it have any, does it help people? Or does big alcohol just use it to sort of go, right, we've ticked that box and we're okay now?
Look, I mean, the first thing is, I would say, and I was part of big alcohol, I think there's some very good people who do care. And I don't believe they're sitting there going, I just want to kill people by getting them to drink as much as possible or destroy their lives. I don't. Yeah. And I think that there is a positive intent here, which is genuinely people want to do what I was suggesting earlier on, which is just drink less, enjoy the experience. Please just don't drink too much. There's a genuine desire for that. That's positive. Okay. However, I've never been a huge lover of the drink responsible term, because whilst I understand the intent, the issue at the end of the day is where do you draw the line, and where do people's definition of responsible is very, very different. Yes. And I'll give you an example. One of the things that I was anti, which was Christmas time, so everybody go out and have a good time. I'm going to encourage you to drink responsibly, and therefore, so rather than you getting in your car, I will provide a free cab home. Okay. Well, what are you actually saying? You're really saying, therefore, you get paralytically drunk, and we'll put you in a cab, and we'll somehow cart you home. So the intent then, unfortunately, falls into the wrong spaces. I think we've got to be much more careful about it. And I think, if anything, and my colleagues in Big Out may not like this, I would rather people say, do you know what, there is a risk? Yeah. Fact. So for years and years, we pushed this point that it's called the J curve. It's all right to have a couple of drinks, but by the way, they're actually good for you. And therefore it's okay. No, the fact is it's not. I can't honestly sit down with all the evidence and say it's a good thing. So I would rather say to you, same as a car, same as all these other pursuits, and whether you're parachuting or otherwise, there is a degree of risk. Yeah. I need you to understand that. And therefore, what I'd like you to do is be careful how much you drink. That's actually a more responsible way of thinking about it, rather than just ignoring it.
And I think that goes back to what you said before about educating people and giving them the facts, or whether that is about low and no and light alcohol or full strength alcohol. One of the things that I'm hoping to do with Low and No Drinker and the podcast and the magazine is to give people information so that they can make informed choices, whether that's choosing to drink, to moderate, to go teetotal, whatever it is, but having some facts behind you. And that's facts and not fear. Absolutely. Because one of the dangers is that in this space, a lot of people can go, as you mentioned, the word sort of extreme to the other end. Alcohol is bad for you. It's evil. It's the devil. It's going to give you cancer. It's going to ruin your life. Well, actually, the vast majority of the population moderate. We all do. Absolutely. So It's about giving the people the facts about these drinks so that they can make wiser choices. And sometimes they won't make wise choices. Sometimes I didn't make wise choices. I'm sure you've made a few foolish choices in your past.
Oh, I've made a few. I promise you that.
But it's about empowering someone to know that they do have a choice in the first place, which I think a lot of people don't often recognize.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree with you.
So take me then from big alcohol to your brand new venture, which is the very, very exciting recent launch of Dionilife, because this sounds very exciting. So let's tell Lono Nation what it's all about.
Look, I think so. So in a way, so the journey that's taken me here, and thank you for asking, Denise, is a massive part of the context. I think the second piece of that context is consumers, as you rightly said, are choosing to be more. I mean, they're choosing an amazing approach to this whole category. I think is great, and I never thought in my life that I would ever see or be part of a true transformation that is going on. This is not a fad. I really don't believe it's a fad or in any shape or form. It's genuinely a change. So it's a bit like, I think sort of Netflix goes from a hard cassette to streaming. You've got the Uber guys. So I think it's that seismic a change. So you look at that, and you look at the experiences that I and many of my team have had in the industry, and have similar stories to my own, and really care very deeply about society and the world and where we're going, and also believe, therefore, in the sort of Patagonia effect of, could you create something that is incredibly commercially successful? Now, some will. This is sometimes people say to me, "Well, that means you're making yourself rich." No, the thing about a commercially successful organization is, one, it has credibility and has substance, and B, it has oxygen. If you have oxygen, you can do good. Without oxygen, I can't do any good, and that's why Patagonia, I think, got it right. They were commercially very successful. They put great products, and they did some good. So I think for me, the opportunity of putting all these pieces together and the team was what led us to launch the Dionilife. I think that the second piece here is, and I want to link it, the issue with people who did not drink alcohol is the stigma associated with being somebody who did not drink alcohol. Because if you remember, with the world in which we lived in, real people drank alcohol. Yeah. And that's the only way to have fun, which I've debunked, I hope, in what we said earlier on. Mm-hmm. The problem with that, therefore, is if you don't drink alcohol, then I'm afraid you're going to be compromised. So stand by. The beer's not going to be particularly good. The spirits are going to be horrible and everything. But you know what? You're that boring person who stands in the corner, or you're dysfunctional, or you're a recovering alcoholic or whatever, and therefore, I'm sorry, that's tough. Well, our view is, if we want to do this right, and we really believe in making a difference, then let's stop compromise. Let's actually provide the consumer with something they're going to really enjoy in a social setting. So there's a danger that it's all about health. Actually, I think it's about well-being. Yes. And I think we're forgetting the mental side of all of this. So let's provide you something where you can sit in a social occasion. You may have had a drink, but you now want to go to something else, alternate. And by the way, imagine going to a celebration like a wedding. And I've seen this, where everybody's drinking champagne because they're celebrating, and you're given sparkling water with maybe some elderflower juice in it because I'm afraid you should be drinking. I'd love to be able to say, no, here is a non-alc champagne, or here is, you like a tequila? I'll give you a non-alc tequila. But by the way, it tastes like a tequila. Yeah. Just no ethanol. So I think behind all of that was, let's embrace this. Let's go in. Let's be a complete pure play. So I don't want the baggage of alcohol and somebody saying this is the way alcohol's always worked, and therefore you've got to be selling out. No. And whilst inclusive, I want to provide, or the team wants to provide, fantastic quality liquids where there is no compromise, with brands that sit in my culture, that sit with me and I understand them, available to me and at the right value for them. that's the excitement of what we've set out to do, and I hope that's what we will achieve, and we're determined to.
I can hear that determination, and I love the passion in it. Because the best founders are those who are solving a problem that they are feeling themselves or they've experienced, because you really understand what the issue is that you're solving for, and you're not just in it for the money. And of course, it's okay to make money. Let's not demonize the fact that if this is a business, we live in a commercial world, and it's okay to have to be able to pay your mortgage. That's fine, but in doing that, producing something that is serving so many people and can make such a difference, is just a wonderful thing. And your examples are spot on, whether it is being at a wedding or just down the pub, being able to have something that is comparable so that you are equally a part of it. It's interesting you mentioned, it tastes something that tastes the same. There is that debate, isn't it? I often ask people, do you want something that tastes like your alcoholic favorites, or do you want something that's completely different? And I put a poll on LinkedIn recently, and then the third option was, I don't care, just make it tasty. And I'm pleased to tell you that most people went with the third option. I don't care, just make it tasty. However, I think it's interesting. Some people are looking, aren't they, for that beer replacement, that wine replacement, that tequila replacement. And then others are just looking for something that's quite other because they want to be away from the alcohol. So how do you balance providing people with the drink that fits that need for the most amount of people? Because the way we drink is changing, isn't it? You were talking about your son, that younger generation, way they drink and what they're looking for is probably quite different to what you and I are looking for when we think about what we want in our glass and what we were used to drinking.
I think look, I think it's very easy, actually. I don't think it's complicated. Let's go to your tasty point. And you're right. When we're younger, we have a sweeter palate, and there are some drinks which are acquired tastes. Yes. And just work hard at it. There's one beer where I was told, drink 3 pints and you'll like it. And I remember eating polos to try and get through this 3 pint. And I never really did, is the honest truth. So there are some drinks which are definitely acquired tastes. But there are many, many others which actually just taste nice. And if you think about, many of these, the alcohol companies, and beer, the whole crafts world, people spend a lot of time and effort crafting beautifully tasting drinks. That's what they do. And so there's a danger here throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, which is, why would you throw all that knowledge of creating an amazingly tasty drink out because you don't want the ethanol? So I think there's a really easy bit here, which is to say, let's continue to produce fantastically flavored drinks. So if you like a margarita, then you can taste the tequila behind it, as well as all the other the other ingredients, which turn it into an amazing margarita. The problem with quite a few non-alc margaritas, I can't taste the tequila taste in it. Mm-hmm. And what I'm doing is just taking a variation on a fruit juice if you're not careful. And that's true with a lot of drinks where we can't mimic that mouth feel, throat feel, and everything else. It's all part of the experience. Therefore, what we do is we say, okay, to hell with that, I'm going to create something completely different. We might as well drink Coca-Cola or lemonade. So I think we owe it. That's where I'm coming from, which is take the ethanol out, but just please keep the craftsmanship and the taste and and frankly, it's the heritage and the provenance and some of these all the great. Why would you take all those out? Because they're not only part of the taste, but they're part of the brand and the culture associated with the brand, which people enjoy. And I think young people are looking for experiences. So let them have the experience without the negativity of ethanol.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of tastes and brands that craft fantastic beverages, you've launched Dionilife, working with one of the beer brands that are the most respected in the low and no space. So those watching on video will be able to see a couple of cans behind me that they will recognize. And I have here in front of me a wonderful, wonderful can of, move my fingers, the Mash Gang cult. So tell me a little bit about why you chose to work with Mash Gang right out of the gate.
Um, I'll give you the first reason, and it is linked to the liquid. I wanted to have a beer that tasted like a beer that was non-alc. And so what we did is we tasted just about every non-alc beer going, and we've always had this view of here is the alcohol version. Let's taste the non-alc version. And by the way, we did it at room temperature because the oldest trick in the book is put something in the fridge, carbonate it, disguise the taste, and most people like it. So do it at room temperature, and you can't escape the fact that most beers are still watery.
Interesting.
And are heavily flavored. And then if you get into spirits, it's even worse because the process of taking the alcohol out takes the flavor out, which is why they go to flavor houses, and it's a bunch of flavors. So we did all of that, and there are some good. And you mentioned Rob Fink actually earlier on. I'm going to say it earlier on, and Big Drop. You know, I think he's I think he's done a great job, and he's produced. But you know, I think there are other beers, Lucky Saint, Athletic. I think you're seeing more and more beers now, non-alc beers, which are beginning to taste like real beer. So that's a big breakthrough. And in our case, when we were doing this tasting, we wanted to have a flavored beer, not just a light lager. Because frankly, if you want a light lager and you've got low alcohol, please just go and drink those. I wanted a real beer. And when we went through all the tasting, in the end, there was only one beer, truly, that stood head and shoulders out from everyone else, and that was Mash Gang. And then so liquid was number one, and then the number two has always been, but is there a story? And I love the story. You know, I met Jordan, I met Mike, I met Alex, I met James. There's Chris, who runs his own band associated with this. And here were four individuals who, during the pandemic, and it's a similar story to so many. It was such a difficult time. Jordan lost his business, ended up having to go, and not having to, but ended up living with his parents-in-law in North Wales. And everybody was in difficult situations, isolated as they did. And what they would do is send each other sort of Red Cross parcels. And they would send something that they would enjoy. And it was Jordan who started sending his non-alc beer. And in the process, they all said, well, this is really good. Then they started sharing it with their friends. And of course, like everybody, you were on Zoom, and how do you keep in contact? And they would have these. And essentially, out of all of that came, we can really create a great beer that's non-alc, but represents us and who we are. And they're just the world's nicest individuals. And yet, you know, Jordan ran a tattoo parlor, and so he has lots of tattoos. And they like that sort of heavy metal end of the music, and which is very full of expression and vitality. And you just think, wow, what a wonderful bunch of people! What an amazing story. The brand sings when you see, and you've got Chug behind you as well on the shelf. You know, it's just got the can says. There you are. The can is saying, please drink me. I've got lots and lots about me, but also the branding sings out. So if you put those two things together, we just thought, you know what? It just speaks to us. It's exactly what we want. And then the sort of final answer to your question is, if you're launching a new company, certainly something that wants to be pure play non-alc, beer is the one where the biggest advance is. Then let's make sure that our first expression is just a knockout, and that's why we took on Mash Gang. And honestly, here we are 3 months later, and we've launched in the US, launched in the UK. Fantastic, absolutely best thing, one of the best things I've ever done.
Theirs is a fantastic story, and they are. Everybody I speak to who has spoken with them says exactly the same thing. They're just really nice lads. You know, they're these really nice guys who are really passionate about making really great beer. And for anyone listening or watching who hasn't come across the Mash Gang brand, you know, it is full of personality. It's full of character. Then it's a non-conformist beer, but not because they're trying to buck the system, but just because they're a group of guys who are just doing things their way. And I really admire that.
And you know what? Jordan is probably one of the best brewers I've ever met, and yet wasn't trained as a classic brewer. And what he says is that I know how to brew, and he loves it. He just loves the detail, the art, the science, but I'm not tied to the rules. I don't have to do it the way a brewery has always done it. And that's what I think is lovely in a world where there's a kind of rebelliousness to this. That's what they are. And I hope that's what we're trying to be as well.
And that's the beauty of this new category. I can imagine that in comparison to some of the companies and brands that you've worked with before, now you're in a space where actually the rules aren't set. There's a lot of trial and error and R&D going on because nobody quite knows, and I say this with full respect to the category because I love it, but nobody quite knows exactly what they're doing. So we're all figuring it out.
Denise, we use your sort of tagline of drinks reimagined.
Yes.
None of us know. None of us know. I said to somebody the other day, I feel a bit like I'm going from BlackBerry to iPhone, and we're really at the. I mean, there is massive change going on here, and the consumer is driving it. Yes, there's a regulatory environmental aspect and macros and so forth, but we don't know. But I think if we ride the wave in the right way, then I think in 10 years' time, we could be in an amazing place, again, from a consumer, inclusivity, and indeed business. A lot of businesses that we're seeing right now, you walk into an outlet. I'm in Denver and Brighton where we're doing sort of real focused testing. But you go to Denver and I'll just give you two outlets. One outlet, the manager is bemoaning the fact that they're losing a lot of money. They're having to make people redundant because people aren't drinking as much alcohol. Then you go into another one where they're still selling some alcohol, but they've really increased the size of the NA and they've really focused on quality and brands, and they are net making more money than they've ever made. So if we think about this, where we're going, trust the consumer, follow the consumer, do the right thing, and actually I think we'll see more pubs opening and more opportunities for people to come together in a healthier way. But we're going to have to follow this trend, and you're right, I don't know where it's going. The only thing I would say though is we use the word responsible earlier on. The danger often with gold rushes is that, and there is an element of that at the moment, which is everybody is getting into this, and everybody is thinking about functional and so forth, and THC and so forth. We start to forget the health side of it as well if we're not careful. So I think for all of us involved in this, we've also got to have a mind to staying responsible. So, a little thing like is legal drinking age. I mean, we are deliberately and very clear that we are an adult non-alc brand, even though it's 0.5%. But I don't ever want to be in a situation, and I've seen it, where you end up in a gateway. So I have a 10-year-old son, and he said to me the other day with one of the zero beers, he said, "Dad, so is it all right for me to drink this? And then when I'm older, I can drink the real thing?" And I just said, "No, you can't. No, you can't. You're not going to do that." And, you say, "Well, hold on, you were 13. So I will teach him the same way I was, but understand and respect that alcohol is alcohol. And this is not a gateway into it and access into it. And that's why I don't want to have zero. Sorry, I don't mind that 0 is 0.0, but the point is I don't want to put 0 on the bottle. One is because it reinforces the stigma, hero to zero. But secondly, I don't want people thinking that there is that trick that's being played. So I just think we've got to be careful, very careful as we grow this category and do it in the right way.
That's really interesting because I've seen a lot of people talking about this at the moment. I know that Laura Willoughby at Club Soda is doing some research into this. There was a PhD out of Australia who released a paper saying that there is a possibility that low-no drinks could be a gateway drink for younger people.
Just look at breezers. Do you remember the Alco Pops?
The Alco Pops, do I remember them? I lived them.
You've just got to go back and look at that.
Yeah, the Smirnoff
That
Ices.
was an attempt, but that was a different sort. But it did the same thing. Yeah. It brought vaping. The horrors of vaping, where you hear 13-year-old kids now.
Yeah.
Majority of vaping because it's okay, it's safe. But they're going to smoke. Trust me, they're going to smoke.
So I guess it begs a question, doesn't it? Because is it that low-no drinks, that younger people exposed to low-no drinks will use them as a gateway? Will they use them to a gateway to full-strength alcohol, or might they use them to a gateway to recognizing that they could drink low and no? Because the generation that's coming through now aren't drinking full strength. And I mean, I know this is all speculative. I've got little kids myself, mine are 5 and 7. And somebody asked me the other day, you've got a lot of alcohol-free drinks in the house. Do you worry about the message that that's sending to your kids? And I thought about this, and I'd been to this person's house, and they've got shelves and shelves of full-strength alcohol. And I said, well, do you worry about the message that that's sending to your kids? Is either message correct? Do we know the result? No, we parenting, I always say parenting is a series of best guesses. So, do I know what impact that's going to have? At the moment, when my kids talk about alcohol, because it's in the house, all these non-alcoholic drinks, they say, oh, we don't like alcohol, mummy. And I was like, okay, well, that's good. That's your choice, though. And this is what mummy does, and this is why mummy does it. But it's very hard to explain that to a 5 and a 7-year-old. A 10-year-old, on the other hand, and they're having these questions. These are conversations we're all going to have, aren't they?
I mean, Denise, look, one thing I will say about parenting, and I've had a few children, we were all kids first. We weren't parents first. So when people say, well, you're learning to be a parent, hold on a minute. You were a child. And I can remember all my experience, majority of my experience as a child.
Yeah.
So often as parents, we make excuses and say, well, I'm late. No, you knew because you were there. Now we have different personality types and so forth.
Yeah.
So given that, in a way, I suppose part of my, and look, this is very individual. And is there a right answer or a wrong answer? Denise says, of course there isn't. And I love your question, and I love your response, and I love the question. Look, I think it just goes full scale back to education. Work on the basis that people are intelligent, they make their own choices at the end of the day, and give them a chance to make the right choice. And therefore, it is about education, and it is about recognizing the benefits, and there's a cost benefit associated with this. I just think that if we do it in the right way, and that's why we put. Look, I like the idea of waking up in the morning and seeing the sunshine, and believing it's going to be a great day. Everybody keeps saying I'm sort of half gallon full optimist, and I am, and that's who I am, and I love life and so forth. If you wake up with a hangover and you're feeling rough and you don't feel, how can you possibly enjoy the sunshine? How can you possibly enjoy the day? You can't. So I think if we can encourage our kids to grow up understanding that actually it is about embracing every day, and it is therefore about eating well. So, but it's a whole package.
Yeah.
It's about being physically relatively fit, and I'm saying relatively, but I like to keep fit. It is about eating well. It is about sleeping. And by the way, alcohol does affect your sleep. And by the way, so does stress affect it. And then the final piece is, how do you reduce stress? Actually, sit down with a bunch of friends, put a bit of music on, have a drink in your hand, enjoy yourself, and reduce the stress. I think we can encourage and teach our kids just to live life in a better way, and so this is just part of the education, but I think it's an important part.
Absolutely. I'll say it again. Your parenting, it's a series of best guesses. I don't know what I'm doing. You didn't know what you were doing. Hopefully, at the end of it, we come up with some decent human beings who can think for themselves and make reasonably wise choices when it comes to these things. Again, I couldn't possibly judge my children's choices after some of the options I've gone for in the past. But,
well, me too.
We live and learn, as they say.
We certainly do. I hope.
Damian, I want to take you back to Dionilife as well. So you've mentioned the emergence of the company, your choices to work with Mash Gang. So you guys are still quite new. You're only a few months old. So tell me what's on the horizon for Dionilife. What can we expect to see coming from you over the next year or so?
Thank you for that. I mean, the first thing is we're really focused on Mash Gang and really making sure that, is it truly the best liquid? I speak to Jordan, we talked about earlier on, and I love him dearly. And I said to him, how good do you think our beer is? He said 7 out of 10. And I said, that's great. How good are some of the others? 5 out of 10. Well, that's good. And the point is, we'll never be 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
So one of the things I promise you is that we'll continue to really focus on improving the liquid and making sure the liquid is what we call gold standard, and then the branding. Now, with that in mind, we're creating a portfolio. So we're working currently on launching some non-alc spirits and some ready-to-serves. And again, we're really clear where the gold standard is. And if I use a tequila, and I used that earlier on as part of my discussion, I've tasted a lot of non-alc tequilas, and genuinely they taste like flavored water, variation on a flavored water. So we've used, I'm using Don Julio, for instance, as a benchmark. So I'm saying, let's have a real benchmark here. Now, can I create a non-alc tequila that tastes like a Don Julio? And we believe we have. And by the way, my wife, who I love dearly, but she's, like all partners, they're supportive, but she quite likes a tequila. And so she's still not quite sure we can really deliver this. And Steve Wilson, who's my head of innovation, who is I call him the professor. He's the most extraordinary individual. He's been involved in creating the most extraordinary brands, alcohol brands. And I did say to him, is this possible, Steve? And Steve said yes. And so what he did is he's created this tequila. And Chrissy, my wife, was rushing. And he said, look, taste these two. And so she tasted the first one, both in kind of shot glasses, and said, oh, God, Steve, I'm really sorry. That is not good. I know you're working really hard on this, and I really applaud it, and I hope it works. And then she tasted the other one and went, now that's a real tequila, Steve. When you get to that, then you can give it to me. And he said, well done, you've just spat out Don Julio. So it's possible, and we're really excited, and we're going to do that, and then we'll launch some ready-to-serves that really, really do benchmark against a great cocktail. Because the other thing I will say, Denise, we spend a lot of time saying, so there's a guy called Douglas Ankara who's tragically passed, but he invented porn star martinis, one of the best mixologists out there. And what we did is we took a bunch of his recipes and said, so imagine let's take an old-fashioned. So there's a great old-fashioned created by one of the great mixologists. Okay, now let's taste the alcohol versions. And you know what? None of them came near it. None of them, in all the cans. So what we've said is, okay, none of them did it with alcohol. We're going to have the same benchmark, but without alcohol. And that's what we've been working on. And I can promise that we're aiming to launch in March, April next year. And I think now, if it's not quite right, we won't launch it.
Fair enough.
But our aim is to get that level. And once we do it, then I think, and for me, the excitement then is, you link all the themes of this conversation, which is it's a no compromise version of a drink, a great drink, whether it's an old-fashioned or margarita or otherwise, where people sit around with friends, they laugh, they enjoy themselves, and they have a great tasting drink just without the ethanol. That's what I promise you're going to get.
That's a bold promise. That's a bold promise, and I'm going to hold you to it, because not only are both margaritas and old fashions both my favorite cocktails, the two cocktails that I absolutely adore, but they are difficult, aren't they? They are challenging. Something like an old fashioned in particular, was, for anyone who doesn't know, an old fashioned is pretty much just bourbon in a glass with ice, stirred nicely. It's given a little bit of love, but it's a very, very strong drink.
Which is why the spirits, so a lot of people have gone straight to RTS to avoid the spirit issue. We've actually said, no, we need to get the spirit right and the RTS. Right. That's where Steve is a magician, because, by the way, this is a massive challenge, for the challenge of his lifetime. Yeah. But if anybody can deliver it, he and his team can deliver it.
I'm so excited.
So am I promise you. I like an old-fashioned.
We're excited. Steve's stressed in the corner, pulling his hair out. Exactly. How do people find out about these releases? Where should they go to follow you, to get in touch if they have any questions? They just want to know what you're up to. Where's the best place for them to find you?
So look, I mean, we've got a Mashgang site that's up and running. So please go on Mashgang. And please, order it, and both in the US and in the UK, we can do that. Our own Dionilife website we're still working on, so it will come, it will be there. I mean, frankly, if Damian.McKinney@Dionilife.com. Send me an email and I'll respond. Very happily do that. And of course, we lots of PR, and so we'll make sure people know when we're doing things. But I hope at the end of the day, a bit like this conversation, word of mouth is the most powerful. And I hope people love it so much that they'll just talk about it and it'll be easy to find.
Absolutely, absolutely. I will make sure that Mashgang website and everything is linked in the show notes, and pop that email address. And of course, if people want to come through me to get to you as well, I'm more than happy to act as an intermediary while you're getting your website and everything up and running.
Thanks, Denise. Thank you.
Now, Damian, before I let you go, it's time for my last question, which is one that I ask everybody who comes on the show. So we are recording towards the end of the year, and the weather it's England, so it's cold. But I want you to cast your mind back to summertime when it's a nice hot sunny day, and imagine that you and your lovely wife Chrissy are off to a barbecue at a friend's house. Now, other than, of course, cans and cans and cans of the amazing Mashgang range, what else in the low, no, or light range do you like to enjoy when you're choosing not to drink alcohol?
Big drop.
Great
really
choice.
Simple. Really simple. And actually, Rob and I were very close in terms of talking about maybe we could partner up, and in the end we didn't. But it was a very close discussion. And frankly, for two reasons. One is I think the liquid's great. And you used exactly right. And funny enough, I did take it. It was a sports day. So it was before we ended up with Mashgang. And I took it to a sports day. I know you don't serve sports, but everybody was drinking non-alc, so it was okay. But I think it's great taste of liquid. And then, frankly, I think Rob is an extraordinary individual. I think he's genuinely put himself out there to really help encourage the category to grow and evolve in a very positive way. And I admire him as an individual. So on many levels, I would encourage you to drink a big drop. Of course, they're a competitor for us, so I like competition as well. So that's good.
So competition makes it more fun.
Oh, I love it.
Absolutely.
I love it because I'll just say one thing, and I've said it many times. There's a negative to point, which is I do think a lot of poor liquids have poisoned the well to a certain extent. So people will. So when you say to somebody, "Would you like a non-alc beer or non-alc?" Quite a lot of people go, "Oh no, I don't want it," because their first introduction was awful and they didn't enjoy it, and therefore for all of us, the better the quality of the liquids. And I genuinely think there's a lot of great brands out there working really hard at actually creating great liquids and great experiences. Has got to be good for all of us in the category, and most importantly, really good for the consumer at the end of the day who wants to enjoy a great drink.
Absolutely, absolutely. A rising tide lifts all boats.
100%. That's it.
Damian, thank you so much for spending time with me today. I could talk to you for hours, and there's loads more that I would like to ask you, but I'll be respectful of your day and say that hopefully, if you've enjoyed the experience, I'd love to get you back on the podcast maybe in a year or so and see, what's been going on in the Dionilife family. But for now, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your journey with us.
Denise, thank you. And yeah, you can hold me, you can take me up on the challenge as well. So I look forward to that. But anytime. Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity.